Hi, I'm Aubrey Lyn Jeppson. I am the editor of A Flag to Fly. I'm at Tame the Muse on pretty much all social media, and you're watching and listening to Two Geeks Talking.
Hi, I'm Chris Solis, the creator of A Flag to Fly. You can find me at aflagtofly.com on Instagram or see Solis Stories on Twitter. I'm here to promote A Flag to Fly on Kickstarter, and you're watching and listening to Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined today by two returning guests. This is the first time they've been together, at least on this show. One, of course, is an editor. She's a very talented editor at that. The other is a very talented comic creator and writer for A Flag to Fly. But you know them both as Chris Solis and Aubrey Lyn Jeppson. How are you both doing today?
Great.
Good, really good.
For those that don't know anything about yourselves as creative people, tell us who you are and what you're bringing to Two Geeks Talking.
I'll jump in because I know Chris has been doing a lot of these things the last couple of days, and this is my first one. So I am a comic editor, and I also do lettering and some writing, but I focus mostly on the first two. I was one of the editors on Tales from the Cloakroom. Like the first part of that was Scott Snyder Presents out of the Scott Snyder class, and that was the first volume. And then I helped a little bit with the second volume, just like advising them a little bit on the side, and then I did some design work in the book. Those are the main things. I mostly just work with like indie creators right now. A lot of people from Tales from the Cloakroom, a few people not from Tales from the Cloakroom. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and I'm Chris Solis, kind of new creator. Been jumping in the last 3-4 years, coming up in, like Aubrey said, in the Scott Snyder class. Started off with just a couple things, making my own. And the true ethic of comics, just make them. So I've been pumping out comics probably 3 years now. And this is my second Kickstarter that I'm trying to go for my YA fantasy, A Flag to Fly. Trying to bring a spotlight on leadership, spotlight on fun comics, trying to miss those, and just having a lot of fun with everything that we do in the book. Lane brings amazing artwork to everything, character work especially. It's just phenomenal, and happy to be on the show.
I love the fact that we're looking at a comic that you were on here before to talk about, and we'll talk about your journey as a comic writer. Chris and Aubrey, what ignited your passion for storytelling and brought you into the vibrant world of comics?
Okay, that's... Oh, good. Go for it.
Yeah, this one started off with had been writing randomly poetry songs. I was in punk rock bands a lot growing up, and I just kind of never thought fiction was my deal until I went to see Neil Gaiman talk about Norse mythology, his book that kind of just respun those tales. But in that talk, he kind of opened up with everybody asking for advice, and the advice that he always gives is writers write. And in that moment, it clicked. Like, I've been writing. I have this plethora of throwaway words that I've just been going through and poetry that kind of fits there, and I just never focused on fiction. Once I did, though, it opened right up. And talking with my friends that were already in art classes, trying to do comic books, we went straight into a book about Paul McCartney being a lich necromancer. I still love that story, and I really want to make it. But just the idea of Paul McCartney stealing all the magic from the Beatles to be the superpower, but that slows him down so much he can't catch Ringo. So Ringo's like a Daffy Duck character. I need to make that.
Yeah.
Love making comics now. It's been nonstop since.
For me, I've always been like a storyteller. I was writing stories like on paper as soon as I could write, and I've always told stories in my head. Comics wise, about 10 years ago, Kelly Sue DeConnick did a workshop about 4 hours from where I live. And I went there just because I wanted to meet her. I was a big fan. And I had planned to attend the novel writing part of the workshop because they had like 3 different authors there teaching different kinds of writing. And she was doing comics. And I sat in on the first day of her workshop and I just thought, oh man, I want to do this. And that eventually spiraled into, I love learning. Chris and I are in some Discords together where they'll make jokes about how I'm always taking a class. If you need to know where the best comics classes are, I can tell you. But part of that is that thirst for knowledge made me good about knowing like about story structure, being able to see where the issues are. And that's how I leaned towards editing. I just was like, oh, I'd really love to do this. And editors in comics are so different than editing in like novels and stuff like that, because you have to know more than just like writing. You have to know art direction. You have to know bubble placement. A good comics editor should know from top to bottom how to make a comic and what makes a good comic. I don't know. It just kept spiraling.
But in a good way for both of you, because
Oh, yeah.
you're into this amazing medium that is comics. Tell us what the first issue was about and what the second issue was.
The whole story kind of pokes at the hero's journey and just how much is embedded into all of us of the King Arthur legends and everything else. But it takes it and kind of flips it on its head, because in the first story, it was somebody avoiding responsibility, trying to find somebody to be the one on the poster, the one to lead everyone else because they don't think that they're able to. In that, we kind of drop it on its head, and our technically like savior character was killed off. So if you haven't read that first one, there's the spoiler, sorry, but it's still a lot of fun. In that, it's just kind of an introduction to the characters and the area that we're working in. I didn't go into too much of the fantasy yet because that unfurls as we go along in the story. It's really nice the way the story actually kind of grows up as we go along. Right there in the first one, you have just the introduction to the characters Bach, Leon, Shin, and George. And those characters carry on and trying to start a rebellion against a king that's going mad on this isle, almost like a British isle, called the Isle of Solomon. Now traveling in our issue 2, we come to the first stop, which is Grand Market. And we kind of see what ensues there. We have a nice teaser image of Bach in prison. Get that up there. Kind of dive into leadership all throughout the story to see what really it takes to figure out you are a leader, to see who's willing and also able to be leaders, who should be followers. Like sometimes we do need to take a step back and really learn to follow people. So that's all explored in the story. It's very near and dear to my heart. It was one of the first stories I came up with, and it's evolved tremendously through help of Aubrey and all the creators that really came in the Scott Snyder class. Just talking and being able to have that community is huge.
Getting past the first book, I think, is the hardest. Well, writing it, I think, would be the hardest process when it comes to to this, and I'm sure editing as well has its trials and tribulations. We'll dive into Aubrey as well. But when it comes to this journey that you're both embarking on, what excites you most about the potential impact of this comic series?
The variety of characters. There are so many that kind of resemble, like, more than are used to these stories. Like in a lot of the openers, Sword in the Stone, King Arthur, it's kind of all English kids, all male perspective. And this really challenges that, because there is a huge variety of people in the world, and I'm glad to show them all.
And I think as an editor, that's one thing I push with all of my clients, but I know on this story specifically, like I recommended a book to Chris called The Heroine's Journey, which is, it discusses like what's the feminine difference between the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. Like they're not necessarily two separate stories, that they intertwine and things like that. One of the characters is non-binary, and I'm really excited. We got to get through issue 2 to get to issue 3, but we've discussed issue 3 and I'm so excited for that story. These coming of age stories are always really important, and I think they shape us a lot, especially when we're younger. I mean, YA is important to everybody. Like I still read YA. So I just think it's got a lot of good, the bones are good for characters.
Look, as long as you're excited about it, and from the editing side as well as the writing and creating side and the promotion side, if you don't enjoy what you're putting together and collaboration and working together, then the promotion side is just going to fall flat. And from what I'm seeing, it's definitely not falling flat. It's very entertaining from the social media posts I've been seeing.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, and we owe that a lot to Aubrey, making everything that really shined in my first drafts shine even more, pop even more. Like it really, editors are the unsung heroes in a lot of places, and it's really good to give that opportunity to let her shine, because she did help my book tremendously, and I'm really happy to get that done out there.
That's my job. Just took a class with Shelley Bond, who is like my role model for editing comics. And she talked a lot about how like my job isn't, Chris, you can speak to this. Like I try not to give you, like, unless I feel like I know the exact dialogue that needs to be said. And usually it's something very short, like say this.
Already what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I won't rewrite dialogue really extensively. I will say, this needs to change. It's not communicating what you wanted to communicate. Or what are you trying to say here? So that my writers can explain to me what they're getting at, and then we can work together. Or, hey, let's take a half hour and step on a Zoom call or a Discord call, and you can talk through your idea with me, and we can figure out what you're trying to say to your readers and clarify it so that it's saying what you want it to say. That's really the job of an editor. It should be, if I want to write my own stories, I need to go write my own stories. My job is to make sure that the stories my writers and creators and other people I'm working with are the most true version of what the story they want to tell is.
What sets your collaborative process apart from others in the industry and fuels your creative synergy?
I think that kind of comes from us just loving comics so much and coming it from almost a fan kind of perspective, finding all these classes for ourselves, not really having to go through the whole hierarchy of academia or be challenged that way, but really just the ability to talk about comics and connect with each other. It started off there, and that's where I knew Aubrey could help. Same way as she talks to me about the stuff that we're still trying to work on later on. And having her do lettering is still a great opportunity. And just the ability to meet community, grow the people that you work with, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'd also say I don't know that it is super unique for comics because comics is so collaborative that I don't know if our process is particularly unique, but I think that that's the beauty of comics. I've worked on novels. I haven't published them yet, but it's really isolating and you're not doing a lot of work with other people. And I think the beauty of it, the nice thing about being an editor is when people come to me, they actually want my feedback because they're paying me for it. I think that that's writers tend to bear the burden of the cost initially in comics. Like artists who are doing their own stuff also bear the cost, obviously. A lot of the people I work with are paying their entire team to make their comic. And so there's a lot of passion there. They do want to tell the best story possible. They care a lot because they're putting their own money behind it. I mean, I know we're kickstarting, but even kickstarting, a lot of Kickstarters don't fully make the funds back, or the writers aren't able to pay themselves, those kinds of things. So I think that that's the passion that goes into it is unique in a lot of ways.
Obviously, you both took the Scott Snyder class, and there's been other creators that have been on the show as well that have taken his class in that respect. Ari Gross being the more recent of the guests I've had, and I'm sure there's others that haven't talked about it. But it seems like a wonderful class to attend. It seems like there's a lot of information that can be had. But how did you both find out about that particular class, and what drew you to it?
For me, I think it was Scott did a short class for women in comics, which you don't have to be a woman in comics to be a part of that. I think men who are allies can join, people who are non-binary can join. I went to that class, and when Scott put up his Substack, I was like, this is really affordable. You're getting some really good advice really regularly from one of the best in the industry. So it was like a no-brainer.
I heard about it. I had just started Twitter in the final days of the demise. He was just started posting about Substack. Everybody was kind of promoting Substack at the time. And he was the only one that offered classes. And that seemed like more valuable to me after reading Denny O'Neil's book and Scott McCloud's book. Those ones are phenomenal, but you kind of want a class together with somebody. And in that's kind of what he offered. And my ability to stay home during the pandemic to do it was phenomenal. So jumped on that. The connections of other people wanting to make comics is totally unbelievably valuable. People dedicated to the craft, loving what they're doing, and coming up with imaginative ways to do it again. I love it.
But it also shows that you can do this at any age as well, because I think it comes back to everyone thinks that comics is a young person's game, but in reality, there are many people in the industry, whether they're indie or professional, that started later in life, I should say, not late. If it's late, then you're past. But I mean,
exactly.
But what about yourselves and that particular journey, especially when it comes to the age factor?
Coming in, it was really about I had now experienced life, and I feel like I have more stories to tell. Before, a lot of stories would fall on my wayside, but losing my parents helped me open up to a whole level of sadness and depression that wasn't there in any of my writing. That wasn't just kind of romantic thrills and weirdness. That was just teenage angst. Now it was real depth, real things to get into, real questions of what am I doing here? Through that, it just kind of let me grow up even later in life to ask those questions more and more. I look back at how much comics opened my eyes with the Sandman, with mythology through there, and then all the rest of these just marvelous stories that nobody really takes. I guess everybody takes for granted. They always kind of think they're kid stories. They're really deep, and they really opened my eyes early on. I love stories that shoot over my head. I love trying to raise myself up to kind of meet them. And I try to do that in The Flag to Fly. I try to do that in all my stories, but it's just nice to have something that doesn't talk down to you, but still wants you to lift yourself up.
It was interesting because when I started taking a lot of these classes over Zoom during the height of the pandemic and stuff, I actually had a few creators who were teaching things who definitely thought I was younger than I am. I'm almost 40. I don't know. It's never too late. It's never too late to try something new. It's never too late to change your mind. You got to follow and do kind of what you want in this life because no one's going to do it for you. I remember I was having a conversation, I think, with one of the editors from Tales from the Cloakroom Volume 2. And he was in college and he was saying man, I feel like I'm getting a late start or something to that effect. And I was like, no, you're fine. I've been out of college a while, like it'll still be there. Like even if you want to go do other things, or even if you have to do other things, like in a previous life, I was a special education teacher. That
Yeah,
was what I did for a
there's
long time.
definitely nothing wrong with starting over.
I mean, you could be working at a call center job for 3.5 years, and then, your buddy next to you says you should go back to university for visual arts and film. So, I'm with you at 33.
We're all so grateful you did.
In terms of the characters that you've created here, Chris, and this is for you as well, Aubrey, because I'm sure you have your favorites, but what character most represents you as a creative person, and what character is someone you would like to aspire to be?
That's pretty good. I guess George is the more character I associate myself with. It's kind of a background character right now, and he's really not sure of himself, but he kind of helps everyone around him. But in that, like, it's kind of forming that he needs to take like a stance for himself. And it's really great. I love that character, and I really can't wait to show how much he's actually able to grow. Just like I feel like I have grown myself getting into comics. So somebody I aspire to be, yeah, Bach, our non-binary kind of main character, is this kind of do-gooder, rose up in the system, but still able to question it, still loves the people that they grew up with, even though they might have been a challenge, but still kind of forging their own way and still taking challenges as they come to like question the king and go start a rebellion. That kind of fearlessness is really, really inspiring.
Like in my own writing, like any character, especially femme presenting characters, like there's bits of me in there. And I think they've taught me a lot about like how I want to be. I had a conversation last night with some friends about how I used to be a lot more timid. I used to let a lot more people push me around. And I just like a newer friend was like, I can't even picture you that way. I can't even picture you as timid or not standing up for yourself. Like you are so bold now. And I don't think I'm constantly bold, but like in certain social situations, when like someone says something, sexist, racist, homophobic, I'm usually the first person to yell at them. So, because I do a lot of online gaming and you get a lot of gross stuff said to you in those spaces. If I don't say it, who's going to? That's kind of where I've gotten. And I think in the book, it's also Bach for me. Bach is the character I most identify with and I see the most of myself in, especially knowing what we've got for issue 3. So go buy issue 2 so we can make issue 3.
Yes.
Because seeing issue 3, like so much of that story resonated with me and related to like my own past, like what my life was like growing up. I was raised with really very obvious gender roles that work for some people, but did not work for me as a person. And so I don't know, I just identify with the struggle Bach goes through and kind of being the reluctant leader over and over again has definitely happened in my life. And that's something that I think happens to Bach, even though they are not the intended leader kind of in the story. That's where it lands for me. Is just that, okay, well, somebody's got to lead this thing going on. So I'll go ahead and make sure everybody's doing what they need to do.
In terms of the feedback that you get from this particular comics series, whether it's issue 1 or whether it's issue 2 or beyond, how do you preserve that fine line between the artistic vision that you're trying to put together and incorporating some actual valuable feedback you get from, say, the audience?
Always take kind of criticisms and everything at a kind of face value. I mean, toss them aside if I need to, or really analyze myself if they actually click. But for the most part, like getting into an editor was like my first ability to adapt my story to just other perspectives. And I don't mind doing that because I know this world is not built from my POV. That's simple as it is. So to have somebody else say like, this kind of rings this way, this kind of doesn't kind of follow the themes that you're going after, it's huge. And I will definitely look at it. But if I feel, of course, that I'm in the right or I need to explain it, I will, and don't mind doing it. Aubrey knows that I fought for some things that I really like. And this book, especially, I want things to be funny. I want things to be a kind of comedic stance because I wanted to ride that line of, sword in the stone. It was kind of this hierarchy of weird mythology for Britain, but it was also this silly thing about a wizard just dancing around and having a battle. Those things are great. We love them for it. So in that, I like to reproduce that kind of feel.
My mom always has a thing she says about like, if someone says something about you, you have to like sit with it and decide if it's true or not. And if it's true, you can decide whether or not you need to change something. If it's not true, you can dismiss it, which I think, you have to take that with a grain of salt. We have so much more feedback from audience than we ever have because of the internet and the way everybody's reviewing things and putting things out. And I think we can get some things kind of muddled, or people are just taking it from their perspective over and over again, rather than like if someone's like, oh, well, I don't like this movie because like with Star Wars got a lot of flack for having too many women. And it's like, no, there's not too many women. There's just gender parity, and a lot of the newer stuff. And I've been a Star Wars fan my whole life. So like that was exciting for me to see more people that looked like how I look on the screen. And so I think it's just, um, I don't know, just evaluating the feedback for what it is and then just trying to make your best work. If someone says, hey, you didn't portray my story correctly, you have to go back and you have to make an effort to portray it correctly, I think.
That just comes back to what works for what you're trying to create. If you've already done everything you possibly can to put a story together, as you both have, and especially in a collaborative effort as you both do, this is just extra eyes on content that you're creating. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change absolutely anything whatsoever.
Oh yeah, then in that case, we're happy for the engagement. Somebody talking about it is good, great.
Yeah.
Whether or not they agree with it or not, that's fine by me. You bought it, so great.
What type of feedback have you been getting about the comic and about what your characters and what you've been putting together?
Most of that is pretty much all in the comedy, and then Lane's designs. Lane gets so many compliments on all of his character work through all of his books, but these they ring really great for me because it's a simple kind of story, and to have it so elaborately done with this art, everybody loves that. And then just kind of it's the first book, so they really enjoyed the jokes, they really enjoyed the setup, but they haven't dived into what we really have on the table, what's going to be coming.
Being as we're all in our early 40s, let's say.
Sure.
Sure. Not there yet, but we'll pretend.
Right on the cusp.
Yeah. Not trying to age anyone, just saying.
I'm just being silly.
How has comedy changed in comics from when you first started engaging in the medium to what you're trying to create?
That's really hard to say because for me, my uncle introduced me really early on, but that was like 80s, 70s comics. So I grew up a little bit introduced to like campy Batman from the 60s TV show and stuff like that. So there was comedy there, but there was also this 90s grow up of everything's got to be dark and crazy. Thank God the animated shows came along and kind of opened it up to just serialistic dramas if it's the X-Men, or serialistic action if it was Batman. But that through there opened a lot of doors, and comedy was all kind of sewn into that too. So I don't think it ever left comics, but there's different variations of it. There are the Uncle Scrooge comics, the Chip and Dale comics that were just joke after joke after joke, really sappy, really dumb. But like that comes back to like comic strips. That's what we grew up with too, where it was just one line, perfect. Go on to the next one. It's great stuff. I guess satirically growing up, like a lot of satire and nihilistic views of the 90s kind of brought along a lot of people just shooting low for the comedy. And there's a lot of almost poke funs at Eeyore kind of feel and things like that. But like everybody's growing up more and more, like watching Bluey with my niece right now, it just blows my mind how much they're really doing for kids to understand what people are going through, kind of what's interacting around them. And then just having jokes for parents. Being able to watch stuff with your kids is huge. Like I remember doing that with my dad in The Simpsons. I know I probably shouldn't have done that at the time, but that was a connecting point. We really grew up with that. And that was a huge bonding moment for me and my parents. So I love that. The same thing of shooting above heads. Sometimes comedy needs to be a little bit older than what you're used to, and it works. Works great.
When I told my mom I was working in comics, her real connection to that was Mad Comics from like the 70s. That's really the only comics she's read, like at least up to this point. I think she's read some of the books I've given her that I've been involved in. That was her connecting point. And I obviously watched Mad TV in the 90s. I remember that kind of, not quite slapstick because it kind of evolved past that, but very in your face, loud humor. Like everybody knew Mad TV was different than SNL. And I think Mad TV was a little bit more in your face with it. As an adult, I love Marvel, and I've read I'm wearing a Black Widow shirt. This is like a Scarlet Witch hoodie, like that she wore in the WandaVision show. There's some funny moments in like Black Widow comics. Like there's one point where Bucky and Wolverine come to save Natasha, and I think she's either already partially saved herself. Like she has to get dressed in the back of a van and they're both in the front of the van. And there's some funny moments there where it's like it's very dry humor, but it's still funny. And I think even our more serious comics, like our favorite characters tend to be characters that can have some levity. I think Deadpool obviously has risen to a level of fame he didn't previously have. Before we all knew who he was, well, before the general public knew who he was, like I still knew a lot of guys in comics who really loved Deadpool and how funny he was. You know, he'd play off characters like Cable, who are more the straight man and things like that. And I think we have that in A Flag to Fly too, where the more comedic characters are characters like Shin or Leon, and the straight man tends to be either George or Bach. We're still doing that in this comic too. And I do think it'll appeal to people of all ages for that reason. Like you go back and watch Disney movies, like there's definitely jokes that are for the adults because they know who's buying those tickets. They're not stupid. You got to make sure you're appealing to as many people as you can with stuff like that.
If you want to take it a step further, you have In Living Color, which was before Mad TV. You have the comedy of Animaniacs.
Nickelodeon as a full entity was just nothing but in your face awesomeness.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's so much comedy out there that we didn't realize it as kids, but when we rewatch the series, if we decide to binge watch it on YouTube or whatever, and it's like, how did I not see this joke? Like, how did it just flew over my head at, 10 to 13 years old?
Yeah. I was rewatching Gargoyles with my husband, which was like my favorite show as a kid. And there's one episode where they talk about jalapenos and it's an ongoing joke. And at the end, Goliath screams, jalapenos as like a big comedic, ending to the episode. Like it even cuts off and you just hear him yelling. And my husband sometimes will still walk up to me and yell, jalapenos. And like, it's hilarious to me that like he was not a fan. And now he's like making fun of my favorite show as a kid.
Just the voice acting talent on that show alone was
so good.
Incredible. Like, yeah. Commander Riker as the evil villain. Like, I mean, wow.
Oh, like half of Star Trek Next Generation. I mean, everybody, I didn't realize it at the time how many of them were like big celebrities or were people that were doing a ton of voice acting in the industry. Like so much talent. And they deal with a lot of like interesting topics too. My husband was like, there's some real adult topics in this show. And I'm like, yeah, there are.
When it comes to the Kickstarter campaign itself, obviously it's like a second job. But when it comes to this particular campaign, what have you done differently? And is there anything new that you want to share and showcase?
Yeah, for the second time around, our sequel kind of campaign, we brought back a lot of the logo work and the kind of setup in the first campaign. We have Rob Jones doing all of our banner work and setting up a lot of what's happened last time. We go back into our introduction to the characters, the Crimson King, Bach, Leon. Give you a nice close-up of Lane's awesome cover for this issue. The Crimson King plays a crazy game with all of our characters. With that, we go into who's this for, why are we on Kickstarter. You can see the sample of issue 1 through Global Comics. Go ahead and click on that link, and you can read pretty much the whole issue 1, before you sign up for this one. In the rewards, we have our amazing variant cover from Kara Husett with our newest character, the Merchant. I'm not really sure if he's a friend or just kind of making money yet, but we have him idealized on our cover and looking like he's ready to clean up everything with a bowl of rice. Past that, we go into like our add-ons. We have our sticker coming back. Lane's art is again magnificent in the character work, and we love them. It's really fun. But we also have a mini print package, which gives you both covers in a mini print 5x7s and comes with a Wren family portrait by Paris Pourman. And it's glorious, as you can see. We have Leon, and Eleanor, kind of beautiful, almost Dracula-esque family portrait. Really well done. Really happy with that. All of these are offered and throughout different tiers, and you can get this as an add-on in the mini print package. Of course, there's the ability to get PDFs and a print version of Flag to Fly #1, Flags of Our Fathers, if you go into the early bird. We have the campaign timeline. If anybody's wondering, we have everything set up to just kind of start flying as soon as we get the funds in. Lane is ready to start drawing this comic, as it's not really done pre-hand this time, but we still have everything lined up to just kind of fly out as soon as we get it. Dave Lentz is ready to go, slapping all the awesome lettering and amazingness. We'll try to get everything dialed in to get it over to Comic Impressions. Comic Impressions is doing our printing again. They have done really well with the last one. We had really great quality book come out for our first book. It was really just amazing to have it under our belt. I love that we have such great quality in our first book made. And then we'll wrap it up in a Gemini and ship it all out to you just like the last time. Hopefully nobody else had any problems. We didn't hear any problems from our last Kickstarter. And by that time, hopefully around July, we'll start up the third, Losing the High Ground of A Flag to Fly. Yeah, in our rewards, we have really great opportunities to kind of learn comic books. One that I really want to highlight is our Creator Lord Editor premium tier, which offers the ability to have sessions with our editor, Aubrey Lyn Jeppson. You get 2 awesome interactions with her of being able to edit your script in 10 to 22 page comic. And no AI, no NSFW, please. She gives you feedback and helps you kind of ascend your book, make it a little better, make it shine a little bit more.
Yeah, my process, it would be the same process I work when I work with all of my creators is we do 2 rounds of editing. I mean, if we need to come back to the table, we can. If like that's not enough, you try to limit it just so we don't go over too much. But then I always offer at least an hour of video conferencing with my writers because there's something magical about being face to face. So if you're like wanting to get into comics and you are like, I'd really like to get my book edited, this is a good way to make contact with me and support the campaign because all the money will go towards the campaign. So that's a great way to get some feedback on your work and work with me.
What I was trying to say was, I think this is great because a lot of times we're in our own bubbles and we need that outside perspective when we need an editor, whether we realize it or not, to actively, edit what we're doing because our life experiences are limited, but maybe a viewpoint like your own, Aubrey, will put them on a different path that they didn't think about. So I think that's great.
Sweet. That's what I like to do.
Okay.
Obviously, the campaign's ongoing. What are you expecting the turnout to be for this campaign? Besides getting funded, are you trying to promote this a little differently than you did last time around? Like, what is the end result for the social media side of things?
Really, this is still an independent book that I'm just really trying to get made. I'm not really planning to go huge or make movies out of it, but I just want to see it all the way till, issue number 6. I love if everybody just kind of helped us out and made each one of them because they are encapsulated. Like each chapter is its own little fun. And everything along the way is really great fun. But the story in general, like I can't wait to see the end and see how people respond to like all of it. So that would be amazing. They can just keep us going making comics. Really.
The best of all worlds. You get to be creative. You get to give someone a joyous read once they get their hands on it. And it's just one of those things that'll maybe inspire them to be a creative person in the future, some way, shape, or form.
I love that.
Well, steal it if you like.
Yeah.
I may not write comic scripts, but
Hey, your job is just as important. Like if we
Actually,
didn't
that
have
makes me
media,
think.
I forgot we were offering that. You asked me and I agreed, but I forgot. I don't keep things in my brain until they're happening usually.
Good. I'm not the only one. Once this campaign is done, though, and once the book is in everyone's hands, besides the next issue of A Flag to Fly, number 3, what are you both working on, or what are you both excited about getting started to work on something new?
Quite a few things in my back pocket that actually Aubrey is a very big part of. One of our stories in Tales of the Cloakroom, Volume 2, Sobre Cubieta, kind of inspired a really, really great, dark family Hispanic story that I'm really loving getting into, and I really hope we get a chance to bring that out to people. And then we have a really great sci-fi one that's pretty inspired by Sailor Moon, but also brings it into a little bit of realism, kind of like Alien, a little that kind of sci-fi terror almost, but really awesome group of women trying to do the best for everyone out there. And more just community-wise, people banding together. I love those stories. I want to bring more of that out.
Right now I'm lettering on a webcomic called Maricast Chosen, which is by James Duran is the writer and Norn Nakosa is the artist, and Norn is incredibly talented. I get so excited about this project. just as the letterer. It's really collaborative. We meet once a month. It's really cool. That's what I love about comics. Like sometimes comics is very much working in like you just get an email, here's the script, go do it. And sometimes you get to really like bounce ideas off your collaborators, and that's really fun. And then you had Ari on your show,
Mhm.
so I know we're doing Wardens too,
Oh, good.
because I'm the
Yeah.
editor on that series. And then I know Ari has other comics coming up eventually. So Ari is one to watch. I think Ari and Solis and I have worked together a lot, and it's just been fun to watch them both grow as creators and continue to really make cool stories.
That just shows that talent likes talent. I mean, it just comes back to working on something you're passionate about, working on a craft that you're passionate about, whether you're on the editing side or writing side or artist side. And if you find the like-minded people to bring your vision to life without mortgaging the house, I think everything kind of makes things better for the people that get to read your work. Platform will always be here for you both when it comes to whatever you're creating. So what is one thing you are particularly grateful for in your journey through the world of comics?
Oh,
I guess I'll say the inspiration of heroes. There's something really nice about having a paragon kind of, and nobody really wants to be Superman, but we all kind of have these ideals of if it was me, I'd be that kind of strong too. And sometimes having those models, those people that maybe don't want to do everything right, but do it right enough, like those are really important. And those are really good people to have. It's just growing up. Usually, your focus of view is just what's in front of you. So sometimes that book goes a long way and it opens eyes. And I'm really happy the comic showed me that, just the different points of view of people and how different they could really be.
for me, I think it's the generosity of both creators at my level and creators way above my level. I've learned from like I said, I take a billion classes, but like I just finished up a class with Shelley Bond, and just learning from her and hearing her unique perspective on editing comics just opens my mind up and makes me so excited every time I do it. And that happens with a lot of like the creators I've taken. I'm in their classes like Scott, I'm in Brian Michael Bendis's class, like people being willing to share at that level, and then creators being willing to share. Like when I have a question, I'm in several different Discords. I can go in and say, hey, I'm doing this with lettering and it's not working. Or a client asked for this and that seems out of the ordinary, but like I'm willing to do it. But like, is this normal? Or what would you guys do here? Having that sense of community is really important. And to me, it's important to continue to pass it on to like, I hope to do panels in the future and things like that. And I definitely share with like the smaller communities I'm in where I can. That's the one thing I'm most grateful for in comics is that it's a really collaborative community, both in the work and outside of the work.
Well, Chris and Aubrey, I do hate to say it, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I want to thank you both so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
Before I let you both go, where can we find you? How can we support you? Of course, where is the Kickstarter campaign? When does it end? And anything else you would like to promote?
You can definitely find it on Kickstarter by searching A Flag to Fly. It ends April 1st, not fooling. It will be April Fool's Day, but we will be ending at noon that day. You can find all of the art from Lane and all the things that we promoted here at A Flag to Fly on Instagram, at A Flag to Fly. And then you can find me at Solis Stories on Instagram. The author, solis.com is my real big.
You can find me on like Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, pretty much any social. You can find me at Taming the Muse. That's what my website's called. My website, you can either type, I think, tamingthemuse.com or aubreylynnjeppson.com, and you can learn more about me. And I post blogs about comic process now and then. So like lettering tips, things like that. So that's where you find me.
Well, like I said, that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. You can, of course, find this interview and 1,000+ others quite literally on our website, tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. That's TWO. Of course, the website's going through a complete rebuild, so yay, that's fun. Go to our YouTube channel, which is always updated to youtube.com/TGTmedia. The podcast is at twogeekstalking.podbean.com or just search Two Geeks Talking wherever you get your podcasts. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking.